Andrew. Pleasure to have you part of Careers Combating Climate Change. To give you a bit of an overview of the initiatives, meeting with executives and looking at how sort of key actors are really developing the industry and pushing forward and effectively combating climate change. So to kick us off, I know you've had a very strong career up to now, but do you mind sort of giving us a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, George. So I was lucky. I worked across several continents and also several industries. And I managed, let's say, with a bit of luck, to spot a few trends in the past that helped me, let's say, orient my career towards renewable energy and new technologies. And when I started in the civil and construction industry, something a bit far from our energy business. And then shortly after that, I worked in the oil and gas engineering consulting. And there I was already exposed to, let's say, the hype that we've seen in the PV sector. So that was similar to what happened in the hydrogen space. Yeah. There I started learning about energy generation from renewables, what are the applications. And then after that, I started to focus more on industrial gases. That's where I've seen, let's say, pilot projects, first of its kind, like the Project B0 of Linde, which was a hydrogen fleet, almost like Share Now, but just for hydrogen cars, was deployed in Munich for Linde employees. And following that, I spent some time focused on the electrolyzer technology, several years there with Cummins Hydrogenics and then HTEC and now KRAFTBLOCK. So that's very briefly about myself and what I've done before. And yeah.
Perfect. And in terms, you mentioned civils, oil and gas, and then now you're working in clean energies, electrolyzers, battery energy storage. What would you say sort of drives you in terms of focusing on the clean energy sector?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are a few factors. One was that working in the oil and gas business, this is already a very well developed business and industry, and they have their way of doing things. And there are, of course, a lot of methodology and concepts of how to do everything. This was, of course, a challenge if you are trying to explore new technologies. So that's one thing that attracted me to new technologies, because you had a bit more of flexibility and the openness to try something different. That was one part. The other part is that in any industry, usually people look for innovative technologies and try to, embrace those technologies. And that was also a factor, that climate tech was this area of new technology development and a lot of focus on R&D. And finally, of course, that it contributes to CO2 reduction and sustainability. This is also a topic that everybody thinks that climate tech will solve all our problems, but generally this is just a piece of the puzzle. We still need oil and gas, and we need all other energy, let's say, sources. And over time, we can, transition in a way that is, feasible and also supports the overall economic development.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a great point as well. I think a lot of the time we get sort of quite focused upon one energy source, but it's an energy mix, right? I know we need to move away from fossil fuels, but I don't think there's ever going to be an era where there is none that we use as a global energy system, So I think, yeah, it's definitely a key point. We need to make sure that, albeit we diversify, that we lean on different energy sources, like whether it's BESS or hydrogen or wind or solar at any particular time, in all regions, right? So moving on to the
exactly. So just one point about that, George. So this is also what we've seen in the hydrogen space, and out of every my rule of thumb is that out of every 10 projects, one materialize.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there needs to be feasibility. So the owner or the investor or the off-taker, they need to see that the numbers add up to a positive ROI. And that's also what you need to keep in mind, is that we need to deploy sustainable solutions, but they need to be competitive and compete with existing solutions. This way we can move faster.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it moves on to the next question. Obviously, there's challenges that we face in the hydrogen sector and BESS and clean tech sector. But in terms of your career, has there been any sort of key challenges that you've faced, and how have you overcome them, would you say?
Yeah. So a common challenge I faced was related to, let's say, resistance in large organizations. So I worked for a few of those, and there it was almost a repetitive scenario where there was always skepticism about new technologies and new trends. And this is something, I mean, you probably hear also from other executives, where it's a common cliche that people say that large companies are not able to, adopt new technology or move fast enough. And this is also something I learned even in some of my studies with one of the very famous Harvard professors. His name is Clayton Christensen in Harvard. Done a program with him, and he said, yeah, large organizations fail to disrupt, and usually a fraction of companies are able to actually do that. So that being said, I was lucky to be able to somehow influence that. Not in all scenarios, I have to be honest, but usually you need to educate and also show examples of what works and what doesn't work. Yeah. Because those large successful companies, they tend to think, okay, what we've done before would also work in this new technology. But we know this from let's say, even electrolyzer business. It's very rare to find the actual know-how and the key experts for those technologies. In some cases, there's just a handful of people who've worked on in some specific areas. So it is, of course, the battle is often internally, not really with the customers. Yeah. To educate the rest of the organization, what are the risks and what are the opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It's something that we see a lot in terms of corporate red tape, I suppose, is a phrase that we use in terms of the energy transition is so dynamic, right? That you need to be able to move and be very agile in order to capitalize on the areas that you need to develop. And sometimes the powers that be can't move in a quick enough way to allow those things to move ahead. So no, it's a challenge that we see in small, large, and massively developed businesses, right? I think it's something that can't really be overlooked. And looking more acutely at the sector, then obviously you've worked at Cummins, H-Tech, and now at KRAFTBLOCK. It's probably more of a question regarding the prior employers, but in terms of sort of struggles, what sort of struggles did you see from looking for experts for very specialized skill sets when you were at those businesses?
You mean when it comes to
acquiring people for electrolysis or hydrogen production or fuel cells? When you were formerly at Cummins, was there any key trends that you found when trying to secure that level of talent or personnel?
Yeah, there are, of course, several challenges, because this is something you're also exposed to. If you're looking, let's say, with someone for expertise in, let's say, PEM, or someone with very, very specific expertise on membranes or really very specialized areas, there is not so many of those. And that being said, if there is someone who's very experienced in those areas, they're very expensive, but at the same time, they also have the luxury to pick who they want to work for. Yeah. And that being said, it's almost like a Pareto principle, which is, let's say, to those who have, more will be given. So you have one or two of the top players, and that's where everybody wants to go, because they have the best product already, and they have the most innovation. And that's, of course, a challenge to those who want to break this pattern. How do you attract, those experienced people. We have managed to do that in the sales, at least in my organization at HTech. When I started, it was just 4 people. When I left, it was around 23 people or 25, something in that range. All of them came with experience from electrolyzer, industrial gases, and the factor there was, of course, selling them the story of what we want to achieve at HTech, but also they had the trust, of course, in the leadership. That's being myself, but also the leadership of HTech and MAN, that this is a promising venture, that will grow.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's a great point to look at as well. And it moves on to the next question that I do have in terms of one area that we really focus on is diversity. When we work with our partners, ensuring diverse shortlists and gender and everything that falls into that. But from a more of a corporate perspective or working in businesses, what do you believe companies can do to bring more diversity, and not just across gender, but across the entire selection?
Yeah. So I had some initiatives in that regard in the past when it comes to diversity, because everybody's focused on gender diversity or ethnic diversity, which is almost a little bit of a marketing stunt. But what we want to do to go deeper is to actually have diversity of thought and also diversity of values. And that's something we need to push for. And the other thing is also, how do you attract diverse mentalities? So, for example, when you advertise technical positions and say, okay, we're looking for an electrical engineer, that's a little bit of a standard approach. But if you want to attract people that have or more focused on the mission, then you need to also mention what are they going to contribute to. So this, let's say, mission-driven approach appeals to, let's say, a different group that are just than the standard, hey, we're looking for a mechanical engineer and that's it. So there are different strategies that we try to deploy, but there are some, of course, limitations, and this is something we try to explore with our partners similar to you, that are, let's say, very focused to bring the right people, the right values, and spend a lot of time also to invest, energy into understanding the requirements.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting way to look at that as well, rather than looking at the end goal, looking at the process and then implementing that process and then hopefully changing the end goal, right? I think looking at thought processes and having diverse ways of thinking is a really interesting way to look at that topic, right? Because then naturally the results that you have would fit what you're looking for, if that makes sense. So no, I think that's a very interesting way to look at that scenario. In terms of looking more at yourself, obviously you've worked in clean energy now for quite a while. What would you say your biggest achievements are in sort of tackling climate change?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's still, I'm not yet too old, so I think there's a lot of potential to have also notable achievements in the future. But and some of it is, of course, a bit of luck. I mean, I worked on some of the largest PV solar park in Dubai and Emirates. That was already in 2014. I witnessed, the B0 project at Linde. This was, ahead of its time type of project. The Cummins Air Liquide 20 megawatts at Bécancour was also ahead of its time and one of the notable achievements. So just being able to support on some of these initiatives is already, some of my good successes, I would say.
Yeah, and then in terms, but looking more at sort of KRAFTBLOCK and the business that you've recently joined, are you able to give us a bit of a sort of background in terms of your decarbonisation projects and what you might be looking at over the next sort of 12 to 24 months?
Yeah. So KRAFTBLOCK is basically also another decarbonization technology that it adds, let's say, a different puzzle piece to in addition to the let's say the problems that hydrogen solves. So it's a heat battery where you can use excess heat from existing processes to store that heat and use it later. or you can use green energy to produce heat. And for example, you use green energy when it's cheap at night.
Yeah.
You produce heat and use it during the day, or you produce over the weekend and use it during the week. So it's a very useful technology for specific applications. We have already pilots with large steel players. We have another project with PepsiCo in the Netherlands. It's the largest of its kind worldwide. So there are different applications to store heat or also generate steam or thermal oil. So it's basically can decarbonize almost every industry, whether that's ceramics. So the typical targets are ceramic, steel, cement, refineries. We capture also flare gas. So we could capture flare gas, burn it and use it, to store the energy to restart some processes later on, or just use it for a different application.
Yeah, fantastic. And then in terms of, you've worked for various technology providers, right? From H-Tech with electrolyzers to KRAFTBLOCK on BESS and Cummins with fuel cells. But in terms of commercializing technologies, what challenges do you foresee in general, and maybe for KRAFTBLOCK as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean the commercialization, you need to have kind of rollout plan. So you need to focus on the status of your product, and depending on how advanced your product, how much technological challenges you have, you need to bring a stable product to the market, and this will dictate also how fast you can go. Bringing, and this is something maybe some companies want to bring a minimum viable product, but in the hydrogen space or in climate tech, you bring a problematic product. We've seen this with different players. They rushed and they brought, let's say, several products into the market, even large products, and then they had to pull back and scale back, and it cost them a lot. So I think it's better to go slow, focus on the product development and the technology, and then you can, go faster. And so that's one aspect of product development. Second aspect is a regional focus. So where do we have the most mature regulatory frameworks, in which countries have the most investments, have the most initiatives to deploy pilot projects. So all of those to navigate, let's say, those questions will help you deploy a more successful commercial strategy than focusing on let's say other more attractive opportunities. A good example would be if you get an opportunity, there was a lot of demand or some demand from Korea for electrolyzers, but if you don't have the codes and standards for Korea and you try to sell there, you will waste significant resources developing a brand new product. You will have delays. The organization will be distracted. Also, the engineering and project management resources will be completely, consumed by such effort. And at the same time, it's not a large region where you will deploy a lot of projects. It's just one country at the end of the day. So those strategic decisions about where to roll out your product and not following just spontaneous opportunities can save you a lot of pain along the way.
Yeah, of course. I think taking a measured approach. I think we've seen some people across the clean energy sector maybe affected by that over the past 12 months. I think, yeah, making sure that the decisions that you make are the right ones. And obviously, hindsight's a great thing, right? And we can always look back and think we can improve. But no, I completely agree. Making sure that small steps and positive steps are made where you don't have to take 3 or 4 steps backwards is so important, right? Looking more at yourself, Andrew. Obviously, you've had a super solid career up to now and joined an amazing business very recently. If you could maybe look back and speak to an earlier Andrew, per se, what pieces, or if you could give him 3 pieces of advice, what would they be and why?
Yeah, so I had to think about this really to try to reflect about what was missing me in the past. So I think usually when you're starting something new, you're a bit you're not very self-confident. So I think this goes hand in hand as you grow when it comes to competence. So you need to have let's say, a bit of self-confidence while staying humble to actually learn as much as possible, and let's say being open to all sorts of advice, all sorts of opinions, and this will help you in your, let's say, growth. So that's the first point. The other point is actually, and this is maybe a bit of a cliche, but it's true. So often in organizations, there's so much to do, and some people prefer to focus on their part. But what has proven to be very valuable for organizations, and also for me personally, is to, let's say, work hard in the sense of fixing as many problems as you can. So that usually pays off. If it doesn't pay off in this job, it will pay off in the next job. If it doesn't pay off when it comes to, let's say, growth in your job, it will pay off in regards to, let's say, the know-how you collect and the experience you gain. So that has proven for me to be very valuable. And finally, to tell the truth. So in organizations, there is often all sorts of pathology and politics, and if you want to stand out and don't want to get also consumed by the different politics, then what I learned is to be someone known for speaking forthrightly and also telling the truth. And that also has to do with integrity. So that's something I would. Those are the three, let's say, things I would have shared with myself in the past.
Yeah, I think the last one's so key, right? When you're in any organization, making sure that integrity is at the forefront of how you operate. Not every time people enjoy the truth, but it is what makes things progress in the rate that we need, right? And people need to hear the truth. If it's a good idea, a bad idea, a mediocre idea, being truthful in your approach is definitely how I like to operate, and I know it's how you like to operate as well. And it all ends up in everyone meeting the same goal, right? So, no, I think it's an amazing point, and it moves on to the last question that I have. Really, I think in terms of the clean energy sector, we are going to have to look at other industries. There's that many projects that we need people. It's a transition. We need people to move across. So, whether that's oil and gas or civils in industries that you've worked in. What advice would you give those who are looking to enter or join the energy transition per se?
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities actually in the energy transition space. Maybe especially for those who are coming from traditional industries. So if you're working for steel manufacturing, you understand the process, you understand the business, and that could be very valuable, for example, for an energy storage company like KRAFTBLOCK, or a hydrogen electrolysis, or fuel cells, or any other technology, compression or so, because you're coming basically from the end customer that will eventually use those applications. So I think looking at where let's say those climate tech solutions fit into the traditional industrial businesses, reverse engineering that, and then using your know-how in those traditional industries will be valuable for the person to transition, and also would be valuable for their new employer in the climate tech space to gain this understanding of those traditional, let's say, large industries.
Yeah, of course. I feel like we're going to, for a lot of the projects that we have in process at the moment, I think we're going to have to lean a lot on the expertise that has been around for the past 25, 30 years. I think a lot of the time we get caught up on having to reinvent the wheel or having a new methodology for different things, don't we? And it's not always the case. So I think there's a lot of value that can be added from all the aerospace, automotive, energy and power sectors, right, that are going to be crucial for us to transition, and get to where we need to get to from a climate perspective and from a technology perspective as well. So no, I completely agree. And yeah, it goes without saying, Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you take part of the series as well, and pick your brain on all the different thought processes and your background, and what a great career you've had so far as well, and looking forward to watching it develop over the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years as well. It's a pleasure to have you part of the series, Andrew.
Thanks, George. Same here. Always nice to talk to you. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak and to share a bit about what I've done so far, and look forward to speak soon.
Brilliant. Thanks.